So I'm talking about LiDAR mapping of fuels for identifying risk areas and optimizing cost of fire smart treatments. So first, the commercial about Arbonaut. I'm sorry, it comes every year. So what Arbonaut does, we provide spatial information for operational decision making. Couple of examples, a little bit of power line corridor on the upper left from LiDAR, some conditions mapping for logging sites, some forest inventory here, and some protection of houses from forest fires. And because I'm a boring speaker, so if you catch this, you can actually see the maps on your own cell phone or on your own laptop as I speak. So I give you a couple of seconds to get prompts.arbonaut.com. F at P and Collie 2019. So actually, Juha, you already touched some of this project in your presentation, but I'm looking a little different aspect, so I think there's different things. Here is a little sample area in Lieksa. So we have been covering all area of Lieksa with forest fire maps in projects with Metsäkeskus Forest Center, and also with touching with project with Metsäkeskus and FMI. So here I took a little more practical approach there, how to use the data to prevent forest fires, do preventive actions. So we have been talking about fuel management, and in Finland we have been lucky, we don't need to do a whole lot of fuel management, but there are cases where it might help. In our case, the biggest fuel management is this. We have very extensive network of forest roads in Finland, and that's a fire break by itself. It has very big impact on Finnish forest fires. We also have the stand structure that will affect the thinning forestry will affect. So it's not very high probability to get big fires in Finland. This area here, you don't see any forest roads because it's part of national park in North Karelia here. And there's one area that we can look that's quite continuous forest. There's also pretty popular camping site here on this area. So, and normally the winds are from southwest in this area. So I took this as an example of a potential place to get a bit bigger canopy fire, even in Finnish conditions. This is also shows the remote areas. So these areas are too far from road to do easy management of fires, more than half a kilometer distance from the road. So here we can see that this area is prone to be difficult to put down with fires. Here we are looking the tree height map of the area, and we can see that the trees on this area are mostly mature and pretty big. We also can see that in this area that's in commercial forestry, we have big gaps in the canopy. These are harvest sites that have been recently harvested, and those make natural protection to the against the forest fires. There's, as it was said here actually in Mark's presentation, that when you have discontinuity of fuels, that's where the fire naturally tends to stop. And here you are looking area where you have definitely discontinuity of fuel type. There's fuels, but sometimes they're on the ground, sometimes on the tops, and in this edge it tends to be a good place to stop a fire. Well, when you have forest in natural condition, you don't have such discontinuity that often. Here's a little bit of fire sensitivity map we have made. There's a background is open data from Metsäkeskus. It's stand level data, and then we have used also LiDAR to provide additional information. And when we look at the Finnish forests, we can see that actually, funny enough, the areas with low amount of fuel, these are the most incendiary. So the area that has been harvested and that grows grass about this high in the summer, that's easy to put a fire on, but there's not so much fuel to burn. But the areas that are most sensitive are areas that have this easily incendiary area, and then downwind there's more fuel. So that's where the fire normally tends to start. Here we are looking canopy fuel density. And there tends to be a rule of thumb that if it's 0.011 here, then it's not sustaining in a canopy fire in normal conditions. So if you have low enough density of fuel, there's not enough energy to keep the fire going. When we have looked at Finnish forests, in most areas though, even if it's thin forest, you do reach that area that in good conditions or in optimal conditions for the fire to spread, you definitely do have enough fuel. So I would say that the Finnish forest is not totally safe of big canopy fires. If the fire started and everything else went exactly certain way, you could have a big forest fire. But here you can see the red areas have high amount of fuel, but you also see some areas that have lower fuels. Here I just made a little plan to make some fire breaks. So here, because it's a natural park, if you want to make protection, we don't want to start making clear cuts. That's probably non-kosher for the national park. However, if you want to do protection, we can do probably small management operations. So I used the map to find natural fire breaks like lake here, and then there's a little bit of peatland here and here, and I found the next where we can do smallest amount of management to make use the natural fuel breaks and then make breaks that can be used. So if we just made small breaks there, we could do a lot to prevent fires from spreading. But I think this is one thing that has not been extensively used even in Mediterranean area, is to use a 3D fuel information from the LiDAR and then extensively plan the fuel and manage the fuel. And that might be one thing that could help. I know some areas have used it, but probably not as extensive as it could be used. One reason has been that for satellite data has been used a lot to provide the fuel data, and the satellite data tends to be so low quality and so low resolution that it's not very easy to identify natural effective operations to do, where to decrease the fuels. Normally, important thing is to find the existing breaks. Like here, you can see that there's breaks that could be used. Of course, if you have a clear cut that has grass on it, and if you have fire, you may need to go and do something to it before the fire spreads there. For example, counterburn. I put a couple of slides of the project that we work together with FMI. This is because it's something like quite recent. This project has been done this year, and let's see what goes on there. So the idea is to support the fire boss in decision making, analyze potential fire advantages with simulation. So in Finland, traditionally simulation has not been extensively used. In US, in Spain, I think simulation has been used more. Luckily in Finland we have a situation that we have good open data. You cannot feed it directly to simulation, but it can be processed and analyzed to provide very, very good simulation data. The idea is to focus the limited resources and to say, okay, this kind of fire, let's rate it first immediately as soon as we have the fire alert and see how many people we need to put it down. And technically, our goal was to integrate Forest Center's forest and information, LiDAR-based fuel information and weather data, and then perform the simulations. And the partners you can see there. So here, we actually are looking the same fire as Juha showed. I have maybe a little bit different aspect there though. So that fire started from the power line that you can see as a black line in the middle, going up and down. And then there was a tree falling on this power line, and that started sparking, and that's where the fire started. And if you look at the canopy height map, you can see that actually there's some low vegetation, 2 to 4 meter high, and then this end has much higher vegetation, like 10, 15 meter high, even 18 meter high vegetation there. And if you look at the fire management map of LiEXA, we can see that the area where the fire started was actually identified as incendiary area where the fire might start easily. Of course, you can start fire in any area. It's just a statistical probability. But this was chosen as highly incendiary. And then you have an area with a bit higher amount of canopy fuels around it. So this is a potential site to have a fire. Here's the same prediction as you used, Juha, on the left side. Slightly different presentation of it though. And that's the border of the burnt area. So this was mapped from the forest after the fire was burnt. And as we can see, the simulator was running slightly more aggressive. So it burned a little more area, but overall we can see that the simulation was quite successful. It showed you quite nicely what area would burn in these conditions. So we don't have huge amount of data. Mark, you mentioned that you have 7,000 fire cases that in your model. So in Finland we don't have as many cases to look at it, but we have some. And the fire flame height map as well. So that was mine. If you have questions, there's some time, a few minutes.
Yes, I was a little bit curious. Do you have this data set for the whole Finland or only for limited area? So it's
currently it covers LiEXA,
okay.
but we have interest definitely to provide it for whole Finland.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And how long have you been developing this data and information for preventing forest fires?
Well, so we can say that it started in the 90s when we started developing our LiDAR-based forest inventory platform. But about 6 years ago, we looked for strategic areas to advance our data products, and we identified forest fire management as an interesting market or interesting area to work in. And we used the same kind of LiDAR-based modeling as we already had in our courses technology and advanced to this area. So 6 years ago we looked and said, okay, this is something we need to work on. But the technology itself goes back about 20 years.
So Vesa, what do you think after this Mark's presentation, all this work we have done? You have done based on our data about how you can make the plan, prevention of the forest fires. Does this make any sense after hearing this, what Mark said? Is this just doing something really small things and actually the phenomenon is so huge that can you help it with this kind of work?
I think we had a very good conversation already with Mark in the coffee break, and I think you were also there. And I believe that it still comes down to fuel management in a way that you have to have the fuel to create such a huge amount of energy. And but it comes to a fuel management in a slightly different way. It's not about creating small gaps, but it's probably about in the areas when we learn over time that what are the conditions that can create that kind of huge vortex weather phenomena of its own, then we may be able to model and see that, okay, here we have the risk of it, and then we have to drastically reduce the amount of fuels so that we don't get such a huge heat generated in the first place. But I don't know about the quantities, and this was news also to me. that how these biggest fires developed. We have to still understand that huge huge percent of our fires that we need to work on are small fires and middle-sized fires that work as modeled. There's just now a new risk of generating a huge, enormous fire, and that is a business that needs its own research again.
So shortly, in a disciplined forests like in Finland, so which are obeying the rules, there is still use for this kind of applications.
Yeah, I think Mark didn't mention it, but maybe one part of the reasons why we have these huge fires is that the rural area is getting emptied by humans, and the cattle raising is coming out, and that's why the goats and cattle doesn't eat the low vegetation, and then you have much more fuel there overall to begin with, and maybe that requires for thinning forestry or some other kind of treatments that are applied in big scale, not in small individual corridors, but in big scale to overall reduce the amount of fuels in the landscape. But these are just thoughts.
So right now, at the moment, 100% of the fires in Finland, they respond to this fuel treatment. So it's not something, it's a waste of time. It will work for sure. And it's still working everywhere. The issue is that you should plan for bigger fire events, because not attaching to only this management. You just need to think big. So what will happen when your fires will start to spot kilometers in distance? You will need bigger chunks of management, bigger mosaic. So everything comes down to the energy available. But it's not only the energy available on the ground, it's just the energy available on the ground plus the energy in the atmosphere. So we need to take everything into account. But still 98% of the fires in the Mediterranean are responding to these treatments. It's only that 2% that it's not. But that 2% is the one that is burning 80% of our surface right now, and used to be the one burning 23% of the surface in 20 years ago. So that's an evolution, and this is a good project and a good idea. But you need to plan to look at bigger events and different types of behavior when it will comes to convection. And you will have to change the algorithm of fire spread. It's a different planning. It's not good. It's the main part, but in the future will not be the important part. We'll need to evolve into those new type of fire behavior. Yeah. I really think that Finland is still far away from this. Sweden have seen part of it, but I think that the big thing will be in Central Europe. So I think it's still good. So don't feel like you're not doing okay. It's okay, but need evolution.